Okay, YouTube user Hyperborean Knowledge mentioned in passing, I don't know, like a month or two ago, that he acknowledged that some of the listeners of his channel intend to become a DemiUrge. And he was going to speak on that subject. I don't know if he's addressed it yet, or maybe he addressed it in a past video that I haven't watched yet. But I want to weigh on this subject because it's been on my mind. And before I even realized that is what I long for, like I didn't have a word for it. Like I would wanted to create a world. So the DemiUrge, for those who do not understand the concept, is an entity which created this world, the physical universe here. And in like Christian Gnosticism, the DemiUrge is less than the one true God. The God is above the DemiUrge. The DemiUrge is at best like a servant. And I'm not especially familiar with Gnosticism, but that's my general understanding. And then so some would argue that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, actually did not come from the DemiUrge. It came from the source. Okay, so to be the entity that can create a world, I think I'd like to do that. I think a lot of people would. I think of all the people who have great imaginations, who have written just fantasy literature, science fiction literature, weird fiction literature, all these things, all this world building in detail. I mean, think of things like the Silmarillion by Tolkien, and all the maps and all the lore associated with Middle Earth. It's absolutely amazing, right? I think of other great authors. You have Ursula Le Guin, who did the Earthsea series. You have the Dragonlance novels. Was it Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman? What do you have? Discworld. You have that's right, I'm drawing a blank right now, but like whatever, people who write Star Trek novels, people who like say this is what it's like on the planet, Kronos, which like you get to see a little bit of it in Star Trek: The Next Generation and in DS9, but really, do you really know? Like, people write whole novels fleshing out just like the in-depth culture of these alien worlds and stuff. It's really amazing, this world building. And you have people who create worlds for tabletop role-playing games, and like people really get into the lore and the geography and the history and like the biology and like how everything seems to work and click together, and like really just fleshing it out. Amazing, really amazing stuff. These are world builders. Now, this may just be products of our imagination and nothing more, right? Because we're limited. And so, the only thing we can imagine are things which we've actually been exposed to or remixed in our own mind. But perhaps we can't come up with anything original. Okay. You might even say that the DemiUrge who created this world, if that's, a true understanding of things, it's limited by its own limited understanding. It may be infinite as far as this universe goes, but not infinite compared to the source. But I look at this world and I see a world where psychopaths rise to the top continuously and rule over everyone else. And there's so much misery and there's so much waste, and people are cruel to each other, and just, it doesn't have to be that way. And I know that someone will say, well, stop dreaming about a fantasy and start manifesting this in your life by actually doing things to make the world a better place. Yeah, I got that ongoing, okay? It's an ongoing thing. First renewing myself, and then through renewing myself, my behavior changes and my behavior affects the world around me, okay? Whoop-de-fucking-do, okay? Thanks, okay? Midwit, philosopher, go fuck yourself. All right, and listen. When I die, my spirit will leave this body, and I want to transcend just being just a mortal, limited creature. I want to build a world where people don't mistreat each other, where evil amongst humans is dealt with effectively, and not through like tyranny or control or rigid hierarchical structures, but rather just the fact that human beings can be better. and not just humans, but I'm talking about humans in particular. Just instead of humans being this terrible mix of good and evil, with evil having the advantage, what if it was biased in favor of good instead? I got someone swerving behind me like a madman, so I'm just going to let them go. Everyone's driving like idiots today. I don't know if it's just because it's Friday, but some real crazy drivers out today. Okay. Well, I suppose there's a world where human goodness had the advantage. And, for example, people just tended to be good. And so evil is dealt with effectively just by excluding it. Right? You know, if you committed a serious crime, you would just get kicked out. And it would be a sufficient wilderness between human settlements that humans being imperfect, if they misjudged what they accused you of, then the justice is you're not put to death, nor are you incarcerated. You're just not allowed around them. And you can, if you can eke out a living in the wilderness, or some other tribe wants to take you in and you behave yourself, then so be it. To me, that, first of all, that's what I want the world to be like, okay? And I don't think it can be on this earth because evil seems to always have the advantage. But imagine a world where if someone committed a serious crime, if they were a murderer or a rapist or just a seriously violent person, and they just get kicked out. They get branded and kicked out. Imagine that. You can just remove the trash from amongst you. And maybe lesser offenses are paid back through like restorative justice, right? Especially stuff that's ambiguous, you cut down a tree, it falls, and maybe it crushes the neighbor's cow, and oops, you weren't trying to kill the cow, right? You pay recompense and you grieve the cow, of course, but and then you move on. You move the fuck on. You just solve your problems. And of course, what about the struggle against evil that keeps life interesting? And that's where I admit my limitation. Can I imagine a world where there is no evil? No, I can't. That's my limitation, because I grow up in a world where evil is everywhere. So like in a fantasy world, there will be places where there's monsters and just hideous things and things you don't want to run afoul of, that's for sure. And that could create problems for people. But humans themselves will tend to be good, and evil is more physically manifested as monsters rather than as monstrous people. And that when you have tribes of people who can't, agree on something, they just separate. They don't need to go to war over territory. The world's big enough, and it's sufficiently, the circumstances of life are sufficiently limiting to population growth that it's, no big deal. Okay, you have your cultural preference, I have mine. We stay separate, but we still trade. Maybe there's still international holidays or something that we all honor. I don't know, like it's, whatever, the summer solstice or the winter solstice or things like that, right? And maybe there's tourism, maybe there's intellectual exchange, but when there's major differences, they just leave each other the fuck alone. And everyone believes it. Everyone thinks it's good to leave each other alone. And I think the world would just be a much better place if people did that. And it'd still be the challenges of life, So, I'm totally into, the D&D thing, the Dungeons and Dragons, maybe these dungeons open up mysteriously. There's some magical force that opens them up, right? It could just be built one brick at a time by, some mad wizard. But, maybe they're organic. Maybe it's part of the universe and it attracts monsters there and all kinds of weird stuff. I think that's a cool idea. I think it'd be really cool if that was a real thing. And some would say, why would you create a world where people can suffer? And I say, well, I don't want people to suffer, right? So I can understand the idea, how can there be a God, even though I would not be God, but how can there be a creator entity in a world that there's suffering? And I would say that I can't envision a world where there isn't suffering. I think people, part of what makes the pleasant things of life particularly pleasant is the possibility of pain. You know, if life was chocolate mousse cake all the time, I think it would get boring. As much as I like it, like I like chocolate cake, but if there weren't times where I'm eating bland food and I have boring experiences and I have, you know, less thrilling experiences, even disappointing experiences, that makes the cake all the more special, because look at this, I can actually sit down and just, wow, this is a contrast to everything else. And maybe someone who's better than me can envision a world where you don't need that contrast between pain and pleasure and between good and evil. And so be it. I'm sure there's somebody out there who, like, maybe compared to me might be more like morally ambiguous. And if they wanted to create a world, you know, it'd be more of a morally gray world of self-interested people, you know, kind of like the Conan the Barbarian stories, where nobody is particularly wholesome. Now, I haven't read all of Robert Howard's stories, but I've read a few, and the people in that world definitely seem to be kind of, you know, heroes and villains alike, kind of in the middle. You know, there's some particularly nasty villains, and then there's some not entirely wholesome heroes and ordinary people, and so on. You know, maybe that's the world you would feel more comfortable in. Because what I would like to do is create a world that I can go live in. And yeah, I know it sounds very arrogant and self-centered. But so what? That's what I want. And you know, I'd like to live in a world where people are decent to each other. Where people are sufficiently decent to each other that, like, amongst peoples, even who disagree with each other, it's still a high trust civilization. Now, they may not trust whatever, orcs, trolls, goblins, you know, whatever other hideous monsters that may wander in. Though not all of them would be evil either. But, you know, but at least amongst humans, there could be, you know, trust that whatever you see in a wagon coming from another tribe, and you know they're not coming to hurt you. They're coming to visit. They're coming for trade. Maybe, you know, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe it's one of their wizards is coming to share, you know, a cure for an ailment or something, whatever. Like something, people just being decent, which is it's missing. And I think a world where, like, if people want to test themselves, you know, there's plenty of adventure to be had outside of civilization. And there's still civilization to be defended. And I mean, I picture, like, I like pig orcs. That's my thing. As opposed to the more 40k type of orcs. But, like, pig orcs, you know, kind of brutish, kind of chaotic evil, with a ravenous appetite and just relish in destruction and feeding themselves. You know, that's like a constant problem. They keep popping up somewhere. So I guess in a way it's like 40k, because, you know, you never fully eliminate the orc menace. So let me correct myself there. I'm not saying they come from fungal spores, but, like, you know, you got to stand guard on your settlements. There's always a chance of bad things happening. And again, I don't want the people populating my world to suffer, but I do think that there's a certain quality to facing up to danger. You know, heroism, I think, is a amazing quality, you know, amongst men and women, to stand shoulder to shoulder, protecting their homes and their world against evil. I think that's pretty beautiful. Why would I want a world without heroism? So yeah, I'm sure some sort of eternal land created by the source, and not a demiurge, could envision of a world where nobody suffers, and everyone's just chill, and everyone loves each other, and you don't have to have this contrast between good and evil. But I am limited, so I think my world would have that. I think I'm starting to repeat myself now. But in short, I would love, after leaving this world behind, I want to make a world where people can be decent to each other. You know what? In the spirits of the people I've known in this world, if they want to give it a whirl, If they want to incarnate and give it a whirl, then they're invited. And we'll just see how it goes. Right? And I'm sure, after they've lived and died there, they can say, you know what, that sucked. Right? Why the fuck do you make a world where, you get eaten alive by a troll or something? Oh. And then I will be humbled for sure. All right, that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching.